The ruler sent other workers, telling them to say to the guest, "I've prepared this feast for you. My oxen and fattened cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding." But they took no notice. One went off to his farm, another to her business, and the rest seized the workers, attacked them brutally, and killed them. The ruler was furious and dispatched troops who destroyed those murderers and burned their town. Then the ruler said to the workers, "The wedding feast is ready, but the guests I invited don't deserve the honor. Go out to the crossroads in the town and invite everyone you find." The workers went out into the streets and collected everyone they met, good and bad alike, until the hall was filled with guests. The ruler, however, came in to see the company at the table and noticed one guest who was not dressed for a wedding. "My friend," said the ruler, "why are you here without a wedding garment?" But the guest was silent. Then the ruler said to the attendants, "Bind this guest hand and foot and throw the individual out into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Many are called, but few are chosen." When I was studying at Duke at the Divinity School, I was a resident advisor, an RA, and the loneliest night of each week was Friday evening. For at that time on the Duke campus, the east side of campus would party on Fridays, and on Saturdays, the west campus would. So half the student population would move to one side of the campus and then the other. The fraternities at Duke are also housed in the residence halls, an old Durham ordinance. So I was the head resident advisor, and my dwelling place was in the midst of the fraternity. Saturday through Friday afternoon, we were a great group of men and the others who lived in the building who were not in the fraternity. But came Friday night, when the frat guys were partying, was the longest night for me each week. Because I wasn't an undergraduate anymore. But I needed to remain somewhere close to the building, and I would pray that 2 a.m. would come early as possible, because that's when the quiet hours once again went into effect for the residence halls on Friday evening. But for me, it was rather lonely, for I wasn't going to be in partying and drinking or carousing. And so it was this one point of the week where I felt somewhat invited, but knowing as an RA, I dare not accept the invitation. But it was this sort of morass of what do you do when it's too loud to study and you really need to hang around. Think of the last time you were invited to an event. Perhaps it was a party. Perhaps it was an event you'd been looking forward to. Perhaps you received an invitation and regrettably you could not attend. Well, thankfully, you've lived to tell about it. For if we would have followed the gospel reading today, if you do not show up for the ruler's party, your whole village and you are all destroyed out of revenge. And I think we have to be careful with parables, for often we overread and we put our own system of understanding and theological debate into it. And if this parable is good news, it's quite hard to find, I think. If it's about salvation, it's salvation for some and devastation for others. If it's the messianic banquet of what might be in the future, well, all may be invited, but one is cast out. For me, when I read parables like this, I have to remind myself not to go down a path where I read into it that Jesus is the ruler or God, but this is more like the world is. We see this all the time. When we think of some great state funerals in other countries that isolate themselves, we've seen in those funerals where people are compelled into the streets by the government to be official mourners as the head of state is ushered down the street. If there's an event that's happy, people, whether they are starving to death, are often pushed to the front and made to cheer and smile, for this is what the ruler wants. Now, reading this story, we'd say this would never happen in our lifetime, but it does, and it hurts. And I wonder, what do we do? And whose invitation are we to accept? If you've been like me this past week, you've been somewhat speechless to watch the tragedies in Israel and Gaza, another earthquake in Afghanistan, and we cry out, my God, my God. Yet, we are reminded that when God sets a table, it doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter who is at the table. For at God's table, we are invited. Israelis, those Palestinians, it's everyone. And when God invites, God looks and God is astounded at the great diversity. Yet, sometimes at our tables, we think and overthink invitations. Well, will this person make a great dinner guest if we invite this other person? And so we're playing this game of how do we make a sociable occasion, and when it's all over, we can be happy that we did not start a feud. Or often in our world, we say, well, we get along as long as we don't talk politics. We get along as we don't talk about the inheritance. We all get along fine as long as we don't talk about, you probably can fill in the blank for yourself. But it breaks my heart that the story of a ruler is one that we can live into even today. I don't know how to solve the problems among Muslims and Jews and Christians in the Holy Land. I wish I did. When I was taking a course, as I was working on my Master of Public Administration and a certificate in conflict resolution, we had to work on a subject, and we were told not to get into one that we might likely not succeed. And this conflict that's happening in the Middle East now was one we were told that we would not individually be able to solve in one semester's time. But what makes me ache is the history is long and the history of trying to live together. But when it comes to inviting, and when we are invited, whose invitation do we value most? Is it the invitation offered by the ruler that brings us great prominence? Or is it the invitation from God to come to the table with all our own issues and still sit down and not just make nice, but to engage one another? as people, as humans. In God's realm, invitation is important. In God's realm, invitation is specific but wide. For those who have never have felt welcomed, God calls them out by name and says, "You are mine. I love you. You can come." When we invite God to our tables with the rest of humanity, I believe we can begin to reflect what the world might be like. As we saw the atrocities last Saturday and into last Sunday, and now the atrocities that continue through bombings, one of the things I said to George, my partner, I said, "Please, no one ask me what I think about this." For it is one of the hardest issues, and having walked those roads and traveled with a group of Christians, Muslim, and Jews together, is to realize we hold so much in common, but there is so much disagreement. But what are the little things that we can do? One is hospitality. One is the actual invitation to invite others into those difficult conversations where we can hear and understand, where we can let our guard down. I remember sitting on the steps outside of the Holy Sepulchre Church, where the tomb is believed to be. And sitting beside of me was the imam traveling with us. And as there was this long line of people waiting to go down into the tomb, he asked me, "Why aren't you in line?" And I responded something like this: "My faith isn't about seeing. My faith is about believing beyond the reality we know, that there is something more, that life speaks louder than death, and that we are not alone." When you get dressed for God's banquet, don't worry about what you come with or how you're dressed. Whether you're dressed for your best for a wedding, or you wear a robe like I do and often say to some of you, "My robe covers multitude of fashion sins." Yet, even without a robe, I know that God invites us, that we are not to value the ruler's invitation more than God's, and that we are to pray for those who are suffering from violence, those who are running for their lives, and to make a way where all of us, of our faith and various faiths or no faith, can sit at a table. For at God's table, all are welcome, and none of us have to be afraid. Amen.